Hello, everyone.
Hi.
How you guys doing today?
Good. How are you?
How are you?
I'm good, doing good. I can't complain. I'm happy to be with you all. How's everything in Michigan?
Good. We're excited to be doing this interview with you.
Oh, likewise, likewise. Nadine, thank you for bringing me in to speak with your group. As soon as you said it, I was super excited to, be with you all. So I'm looking forward to this. Yeah, definitely.
Could you please introduce yourself and what the We Foundation does?
For sure, for sure. So I'm Marcus Anderson, and I created the World Education Foundation back in 2009, really to approach global issues. A little bit about myself. I graduated from UCLA. I was an athlete. I played football. My major was American literature. And I was fortunate enough to actually be able to be drafted to the NFL. I got drafted by the Green Bay Packers, and as I loved football, I loved playing at the highest level. It was my dream to do so. I always wanted something that was going to intellectually stimulate me a little bit more, and I really had a desire to have impact in the world. And so after 5 years, I actually left the NFL to really create that global impact that I always wanted. And I think one way to do that was to create an organization in order to approach like the large challenges that I saw that I was facing back, during that time. And so what I wanted to do was to gain knowledge about what I wanted to, for one, learn about, but for two, that I was really passionate about. Right. And so I didn't have the details of what that was, but I had a direction. And so what I did was I started to travel. I traveled throughout Europe. I traveled throughout the South America as well as Africa. But before that, what I wanted to do was to build my knowledge. So I went back to school and I got a master's out of Sweden in this program called Adult Learning and Global Change. And that really started to give me the foundations of like what were the challenges across borders, and then how could we actually incorporate technology in order to approach some of those challenges. And so with my mentor, he was an aviation expert out of the Netherlands. His name was Dirk, and he really opened up a whole new plethora of like possible solutions for me. He introduced me to academians. He introduced me to different technologies. He introduced me to different groups that were working on these large issues. And so after this master's program, while I was actually writing my thesis, I said, you know what, I want to start an organization. And so that's kind of how the We Foundation was founded. So I founded in 2009, and it was really to approach these global issues and really provide a space for collaboration across borders, right, to solve local challenges. Sometimes you get these large challenges and you want to implement those challenges in every local region, but sometimes those things don't work, right? Because one issue and one challenge in one location could be totally different from a issue or a challenge in another, right? So you had to have local solutions. You had to solve local challenges in order to really create something that was impactful. So over the course of about 12 years, I was able to travel to about 83 different countries. I built projects in 23 of those countries. And, I named it the We Foundation, or the World Education Foundation, amply because I really saw that there was a collaboration that was needed. And I thought that was like the ethos of what I wanted to create through the We Foundation. And then our mission was clear, right? We wanted to design cutting edge solutions really to mobilize industries, really connect change makers like you all, and then really establish new communities, all with the aim of creating a better future. Right. That was the aim from the start to the finish, still is today, that we want to create a better future. And we wanted to do this by improving access to livelihoods. We really felt that having an opportunity to earn for yourself, or to create something where you could empower yourself, or create a new skill, was something that was really impactful for the locals. And then building and bridging the gap between academic knowledge to local communities where there's a cross um, uh, proliferation of knowledge, right? It's not just, hey, we're the university, we want to give you guys all the knowledge, we know everything. It's really about what can we learn in these local communities that's really impactful for us. And so that exchange of knowledge was something that was really, really important to me. So I'll leave it there, but that's some of the reasons why I started the We Foundation and what really inspired me to do so.
That's amazing. um, so we read about the work you've done with refugees, particularly in Haddock. And can you share a little bit about the purpose of that trip specifically and why you chose Haddock?
You know, it's really interesting because in all reality, the project actually chose me. So during that time, I was meeting with a lot of individuals throughout the academic space, throughout local communities, people that were working at the UN, people that were working in different technology realms. And one time when I was at New York University, I was just pitching to their faculty. And ultimately, this professor by the name of Professor Hill, he was running the peace building workshop at New York University. And during our meeting, he flat out asked me if I would work in Iraq. And, you know, given the ongoing Syrian war in that region at the time, I had to really think about it for a bit. But then it wasn't too long. You know, I did my meditation, I checked in with my heart, I checked in with God, and ultimately it was a go, right? I felt like I was being called and I really had to move into action. And so Professor Hill and I came up with a program that took 2 to 3 master students in his program for about 4 months. And they worked with me to develop a workshop on the ground in one of the refugee camps in Kurdistan region of Iraq. So that's like the northern region on the border of Syria. And so I was assigned 3 students for the next 3 months. I had them doing desk research on the social, the political, economical, and the demographic makeup of the region, right? So they could get a clear understanding of the landscape and what was actually going on in that time. And so from there, we embarked on a mission to really prototype a workshop within a refugee camp called Kushtapa. And it had about 20,000 refugees in that particular camp. But there were different camps around the Kurdistan region. In all, there was a total of about 240,000 Syrian refugees that came into Iraq. And so the objective of this workshop was really to gauge the feasibility of a 13-week, what we call We Solve Lab incubator. And we did this by assessing the interests as well as the necessities from both the participants that were there in Iraq, and then also the local mentors who were going to be there. So the prototype workshop aimed to really promote learning, but also this aspect of social cohesion, right, between the as well as the host community. And the reason why I thought that the social cohesion piece was so important was because sometimes when you have an influx of refugees going into a new country, the locals sometimes want to kind of offload all of the problems in the country to the refugees, right? Like, oh, well, you know, our taxes are high because, you know, these refugees, or our resources are low because the refugees have came in. And so what we wanted to do was create an opportunity where local community members could start working with the refugee members and then start to have these cross kind of pollination of ideas to where you really get to know somebody on a personal level. So that's kind of what the program kind of encompassed. And what we wanted to focus on were really the core themes of food and agriculture. You know, if you can't eat, you know, it's hard to do anything else, right? And then the next was education, right? How do we learn and capacity build? And then we wanted to understand what the energy challenges were, because sometimes when you have these camps, you know, sometimes energy goes off during the day. You know, sometimes you don't have access to either lights or computers or technology at whole. And then we wanted to get into like health and sanitation, and then as well as safety. So the goals that we wanted to really approach were, you know, not that were beyond kind of structured curriculum. We wanted to really create a methodology that would work for this local camp.
Awesome. Okay, so our next question is, how did you prepare for this on the ground?
Yeah. So on the ground, it was Ramadan at the time, I remember. So it was there was a few different challenges when it came to like participants when they could participate, as well as kind of their energy level of the participation. I wanted to be very mindful of that. But given that, what we did was I worked with the local UNHCR group there. So it was a UN organization. Well, first and foremost, what I did was when I went over there, I had meetings, like about 15 meetings with the American embassy. So I called in people that were working in the economics, that were working in safety, that were working in agriculture, that were working in all the areas that we were interested in. And I got a really kind of robust amount of knowledge about what was going on in the camps. Who were the players? What were the protocols that I needed to engage in? And so on the ground, it was really about doing the desk research, which the master students really did a great job of helping me with. But then when we got on the ground, who were the local actors that we need to meet with? We met with the University of Kurdistan there to talk to mentors. And really, we found the UNHCR caravan supplied the space in which we could actually run our workshops, right? So they had and what's really interesting, they had a kind of assembly hall that they later turned into a fine arts gallery. But the assembly hall was something that we could use to have camp meetings, to have the workshop in the actual camp, right? We didn't want to take refugees outside of the camp. We really wanted to have everything local there where people could have access and could really understand what the local issues were. And so our perception of the prototype was really positive. We observed like a really good flow, a cohesion between the we team, the local mentors, the participants, community members, the University of Kurdistan, as well as New York University. So that's kind of how we prepared, was really by getting the local actors involved. So we didn't make too many assumptions without having something to back it up with.
And then what is a needs assessment and what are the processes needed to develop one?
So, for me, the needs assessment is one of the most important aspects of the project, right? And so, a needs assessment is like the systematic study that really identifies and analyzes and evaluates specific requirements, deficiencies, challenges within a particular context or community, right? So, it kind of serves as what are we approaching? How do we approach it? What type of implementation, what type of methodology should we use? Should we use, a participatory action research? Should we use more of a traditional anthropological research? Should we stand off? Should we engage? So the needs assessment is really about understanding the local needs and asking the right questions. And so this needs assessment, I think, was crucial to our organization. And I think it's also inclusive of any type of research that you want to do. Now, specifically in our context, the needs assessment involved participants and local mentors that I mentioned conducting field interviews, right, with multiple community members. So they walked around for a full day, really doing these needs assessment interviews. So they gathered data through these interviews, observations, discussions, really with the aim to understand the unique needs, challenges, and aspirations of the community. So, we gave each group um, a specific topic to gather data on, which goes back to the food and agriculture, the education, energy, health, sanitation, and safety. And then they went out into the community to actually be engaged with the local community members. And they each took different roles while they were actually doing the interviews.
So, following the program, what are the next steps for Syrian refugees and Iraqi IDPs?
Yeah, so it was back in 2016, and the Syrian war is no longer as heightened as it was back then. So some have moved back to their local regions, but during that time, after the needs assessments, participants, so the local participants, they returned to the workshop, and then they reflected on their findings, right? excuse me, they discussed how they could tackle the problems, as well as they identified within their own community how to develop solutions. So that's what the whole workshop was, right? So during this process, the participants focused on analyzing the data. We gave them tools to brainstorm their ideas. They identified common themes that might have cross-lapped over the different verticals which they were studying. And they did this really to gain a deeper understanding of the challenges that they faced, as well as the opportunities and the solutions. And so subsequently from that, the participants began to process a prototype for their solution. So we had this whole like human design prototype for them where they could go through the process of prototyping their solutions. And then they followed the structure of this to come up with a hypothesis, creating user groups, making assumptions, asking significant questions, and really ultimately outlining a plan for their prototypes. And so once we went through that process, they started to ultimately come up with solutions that were absolutely phenomenal. From technology, I remember one group, they came up with a app that could help health providers actually track all of the people in the camp, that could give them alerts and notifications when they actually needed to see the doctor or when they need to actually take their medicines. Some had sanitation or creating a wind farm on the actual camp so they could generate continuous power. So these solutions were, quite particular to their region. But at the same time, it was something that they could take and continue after their program or when they went back, to their local communities that they were actually transferred from.
Great. And I guess going back to what you said on incorporating local and community involvement and how important and crucial that is to the solution making process. Can you just give us some examples of how you were able to utilize that local knowledge to incorporate that into finding solutions to local problems?
Yeah, I mean, one of our kind of mantras was how do we actually develop um, local needs? And that we do this for two reasons. One of the reasons is that you understand the actual challenge, right? You're not just trying to throw money or resources at a challenge that is not even a challenge locally, right? And for two, it's really about how do we incorporate buy-in from the local community members, that when we leave, how do they actually empower themselves and motivate themselves to continue these programs? So what we felt like that we wanted to actually have that empathy building and that social cohesion and the understanding of local community problems integrated in the concepts of the program, right? Having them be the ideators of the program. How do they start to create some ownership of the actual program? So, they could actually push it forward and move it forward. And so, how we did that was through the needs assessment. But then I think what is far too understated in a lot of international development work is building trust, right? How do you build trust with the local community members that they're going to actually open up to you about the challenges? Because some of the challenges are very personal, right? Some of them engage with things that you would have never thought of, that that they wouldn't have told you, that you can't find in the textbook, that you can't really have any type of reference for. And so, being able to understand, build trust with the local community was something that was very paramount and important for us to solve these local issues.
I know you touched base on this a little bit, but how would you say does prioritizing local knowledge impact empathy building, social cohesion, and the understanding of a community?
Yeah, that's a great question. Prioritizing, sorry, it's a little bit earlier on this side, but prioritizing like local knowledge really has a profound impact on empathy building, right? Social cohesion, understanding the local community. And I look at like empathy building really being culturally sensitive, right? Sometimes from the West, you have these ideologies about, what things should look like, how they should go. And ultimately, you try to implant that onto a local community that might not have the same resources that you have, or they might have more resources than you have, or they look at a problem or solution differently than you do, right? Or they just flat out come from a different culture. There's different cultural norms that you have to be mindful of. And so cultural sensitivity and empathy building, really prioritizing local knowledge, really encourages individuals to understand and to respect the customs, the traditions, the values of the local community. So it's all about kind of walking in their shoes, right? And then the social cohesion piece, really, it's like this shared identity, really giving importance to like local knowledge, right? And so how do you create like a shared sense of identity among the community members? And so when people feel that their culture and history are respected and valued, it can really lead to a stronger sense of belonging as well as unity. And so understanding of the local community really helps you make informed decisions. Local knowledge provides a foundation for these decisions. And I think, when you incorporate the leaders, the policymakers, the individuals that are well versed in these issues, then it's easy for them to start to understand how to create these gaps.
And what would you say was a challenge or most impactful experience during this project? Did you have any breakthroughs or any risks?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. One of the most significant challenges we faced during our project was a language barrier, right? All of the master students that I worked with, they didn't speak Arabic, but we did have local translators, but sometimes things can get lost in translation. Sometimes, if you want to say something a certain way or have a certain inflection on something, sometimes that doesn't directly translate. So the language barrier was an initial challenge, but we worked through it, right? With the refugee camps, the mentors, local help from UNHCR, and as well as the translators. And so many of whom were refugees from these various regions, they also had limited proficiency in the local language, right? And so communicating effectively was something that we had to kind of get over time. But once we got it, it was a good flow. We created multiple friends, and we're able to use different forms of communication to really drive home our mission. And I think an impactful experience that I had, and I think one of the most impactful experience during our project was really the empowerment of the refugees in the camp. To see, how knowledgeable and how educated they were. There was a couple of participants that had their PhDs, and there were a couple that had their master's degrees. And so, sometimes the assumptions were that, just because they're in a refugee situation, that they don't have education or they don't have the basic needs. And that was farther from the truth for me. And so through our workshops and initiatives, refugees like really actively took charge of organizing various aspects of camp life, right? They initiated activities, such as distributing aid, teaching skills that they had learned to other participants that weren't actually in the program. And then it really started to see that there was a creation of a new form of resiliency, of community, and that something clicked in their minds, that it's not just about the challenge, that they didn't have to dwell just on the challenge of their current situation, that they now had tools to actually start to solve those challenges. And I think that was what was most impactful for me through that experience.
Yeah, so now that we've heard a little bit about what you've been doing with the We Foundation and the program, do you have any plans to expand upon this program, and where do you see it going?
Yeah, absolutely. We're committed to expanding our program. From 2016, we saw and we kept up every year with the progress of these projects and the outcomes. And I actually, guided different resources and opened up different programs, for some of the refugees there, that they could get their online degrees in coding. Right, we came up with a program called Iraq Recoded, and that took about 200 members within that camp and took them through a 10-week program that teach them how to code. And so they, went off to, some of them started working for Google, and they started working remotely for Microsoft. And so that was something that I felt that had a really deep impact. And so, with that, we aim to reach more refugee communities in the future, particularly in conflict affected areas, really extending our workshops and support to those who need it most. And so when we envision, partnerships with like-minded organizations like your guys's, our goals have evolved over time. But I think, we've really shaped by the experiences and the insights that we've gained from this work that we did in these camps, that we can take that, to other camps or to follow up with the participants, of these camps and see like, hey, now we turn into more like remote mentors for helping them to create the solutions and take those solutions beyond the individual as well as beyond their borders.
Okay, we just have one final question for you. How can people like us or we as individuals support the mission of the We Foundation?
Whew, yeah, I think it's a large mission, but you guys are doing it, and I'm so proud of each of you, for one, to be mindful of these challenges, that they are real. And you guys are already supporting the We Foundation because you guys are doing the work. You guys are showing up. You guys are interested. And then not only that, but you're using your time and your energy to make an impact in the world, to make a difference because you care, right? And because you guys have faith that there can be a better world. So ultimately, you guys are already doing it. But, specifically, if there's, any type of room for collaborative projects between UNICEF, and the We Foundation, we can explore that. If there's skills and knowledge sharing that you guys need from me, different programs that I've ran, I could serve as a mentor for you guys. If it's student-led initiatives that you guys want to get involved with, with the We Foundation, or even just on campus and you guys need some guidance, I can be there for you guys. And then I would really kind of encourage you guys to advocate for policy change. A lot of times you want things so badly, that you think that they're going to just change off a sentiment, but really it's the policies that are dedicated to making these changes that are most effective. So how do we create the policies that are going to make these changes in local regions around the world? And I think just by you guys taking your motivation and your spirit and getting other people involved, you've already contributed to helping out the We Foundation. So, and sometimes these challenges seem so large, but it takes one individual to make a change. And each of you have that capacity within yourselves to be that change. So start with yourself, expand it out, keep the faith, keep motivated, keep inspired. And before you know it, things will change and this world will be better. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate the time.